Marcus Thompson stood behind the counter of Morning Brew Cafe, carefully arranging the fresh pastries in the display case. The early morning sun streamed through the large windows of the upscale coffee shop located in Boston's wealthy Beacon Hill neighborhood. At 23 years old, Marcus was one of the most reliable employees at the cafe, working the morning shift to help pay for his medical school expenses. The bell above the door chimed at exactly 8:30 a.m., and Marcus didn't need to look up to know who had entered. The sharp click of expensive heels against the polished wooden floor announced the arrival of Patricia Wellington, one of their most demanding regular customers. The usual morning rush is about to start, Marcus thought to himself, straightening his green apron and putting on his best professional smile. He had learned from 6 months of working there that Mrs. Wellington always arrived at the same time, wearing designer clothes that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Today, she wore a cream-colored Channel suit and pearls, her blonde hair perfectly styled. Her manicured fingers tapped impatiently on her phone screen as she approached the counter, not bothering to look up at Marcus. "Good morning, Mrs. Wellington," Marcus greeted her politely. "Would you like your usual order?" Patricia finally looked up, her blue eyes narrowing slightly. "No," she said sharply. "I want something different today. I need a venti triple shot, sugar-free vanilla soy latte, extra hot, with exactly 3 pumps of sugar-free caramel, light foam, and a sprinkle of cinnamon on top. And make sure the soy milk is the organic brand, not that cheap stuff you usually use." Marcus nodded professionally, even though the cafe only stocked one type of soy milk. "Of course, Mrs. Wellington. That will be $7.85. She tossed her premium credit card on the counter without a word. Marcus processed the payment while his coworker, Jenny, started preparing the complicated drink order. The morning crowd was building up behind Patricia, but she remained standing at the pickup counter, watching Jenny's every move like a hawk. Other customers shuffled awkwardly, trying to place their orders while working around her imposing presence. When Jenny finished the drink and called out Patricia's name, the wealthy woman picked up her cup and took a small sip. Her face immediately twisted in displeasure. "This is completely wrong," she declared loudly, drawing attention from everyone in the cafe. "I specifically asked for 3 pumps of sugar-free caramel. This tastes like 4 pumps, and the foam is too thick." Marcus stepped forward calmly. "I apologize for any mistake, Mrs. Wellington. We'd be happy to remake your drink exactly to your specifications." Patricia's face reddened. "Do you think I have time for this? Do you have any idea who I am? This is completely unacceptable." "Ma'am, I understand you're upset," Marcus said quietly, aware of phones being pulled out to record the scene. "Please allow us to fix the drink for you." "Fix it? You people can't even get a simple order right. I come here every day, spending thousands of dollars a year, and this is how you treat me." Her voice grew louder with each word. Before Marcus could respond, Patricia's arm swung forward, and the hot coffee splashed directly into his face. The liquid soaked his shirt and burned his skin, causing him to stumble backward in shock and pain. The cafe fell silent. Then gasps and murmurs filled the air as customers watched in horror. Someone shouted, "That's assault!" While another person called out, "Someone call the police." Patricia stood there, empty cup still in hand, seemingly surprised by her own actions. For a moment, she appeared ready to apologize, but then her pride took over. "Well, maybe next time you'll learn to make drinks properly," she said coldly, turning on her heel to leave. Jenny rushed to Marcus with a clean towel and a first aid kit, while another coworker called their manager. As Marcus dabbed at his burning face, he remained remarkably composed, even as his skin reddened from the hot liquid. What Patricia Wellington didn't know, as she walked out of Morning Brew Cafe that morning, was that her impulsive act of cruelty would soon return to haunt her in ways she could never imagine. The simple security cameras in the cafe's corners had captured everything, and among the shocked customers, 3 had already uploaded videos of the incident to social media. The wheels of justice and karma were already beginning to turn. By noon that same day, Marcus Thompson sat in the emergency room of Boston City Hospital. The skin on his face was red and irritated from the hot coffee, though thankfully the burns were minor. A kind nurse named Sarah applied cooling gel to his face while asking him questions about the incident. "Does it still hurt?" Sarah asked, gently dabbing the medication on his cheek. "Not as much now," Marcus replied quietly. He was more worried about missing his afternoon shift than his injuries. Every hour of work meant money for his medical school tuition. Meanwhile, back at Morning Brew Cafe, the morning's events had thrown everything into chaos. The manager, Robert Chen, reviewed the security footage for the 10th time, his face growing more concerned with each viewing. The incident had already been viewed over 50,000 times on various social media platforms, with the hashtag #MorningBrewRacist trending locally in Boston. "This is bad," Robert muttered, watching the moment when Patricia Wellington threw the drink. The footage clearly showed Marcus's professional behavior and Patricia's unreasonable response. Robert had always tried to keep peace with their wealthy customers, but this was different. This was assault. His phone rang again, the 5th call from the corporate office in the last hour. They were worried about the publicity, but also about losing Patricia Wellington's influence. Her family was connected to half the business owners in Beacon Hill. While Robert dealt with the corporate pressure, Marcus's phone kept buzzing with messages. His best friend had sent him links to 3 different social media posts about the incident. The videos were spreading fast, and people were angry. Some recognized Patricia from Boston's social circles and were sharing stories about her previous entitled behavior. But it was the text from his mother that made Marcus's heart skip a beat. "I saw what happened. Coming to the hospital now. Don't worry about work or school today. We need to talk." Marcus knew that tone. His mother, Dr. Angela Thompson, never left the hospital during her shifts unless something was serious. As chief of surgery at Boston Memorial Hospital, she rarely had time for unexpected visits. Back at the cafe, Jenny was talking to the police officers who had finally arrived to take statements. The morning crowd had thinned out, but customers were still coming in, asking about the incident. Many were supportive, leaving extra-large tips for the staff and asking about Marcus's condition. "And Mrs. Wellington actually said you people before throwing the drink?" the officer asked, making notes in his pad. "Yes," Jenny confirmed. "We have at least 12 witnesses who heard it, plus the video footage." Across town, in her luxury penthouse apartment, Patricia Wellington was having a very different kind of afternoon. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing, calls from friends, from charity boards she sat on, from her country club associates. The video had reached them all. "William, you need to do something about this," she shouted at her husband, who stood by their floor-to-ceiling windows, looking troubled. "Call the cafe's corporate office. Have them release a statement saying it was all a misunderstanding." William Wellington, a respected surgeon and hospital board member, shook his head slowly. "Pat, I saw the video. There's no misunderstanding here. You assaulted that young man." "Assaulted? Don't be dramatic. It was just coffee, and the service was terrible," Patricia huffed, but her voice trembled slightly. She had never seen her husband look so disappointed. "Just coffee? Pat, do you realize you could be charged with assault? Not to mention the civil suit that could follow." William loosened his tie, looking stressed. "And the timing couldn't be worse. The hospital board votes on the new chairman next month. I need every ally I can get." Patricia waved her hand dismissively, but her usual confidence was cracking. Her social media accounts were flooding with angry messages. Her best friend had already called to say she couldn't attend their weekly lunch. Apparently, she had a sudden appointment. What Patricia Wellington didn't know yet was that her morning coffee incident was about to collide with her husband's professional world in a way neither of them could imagine. Because at that very moment, Dr. Angela Thompson was walking into her son's hospital room, her mind already forming plans that would shake Boston's social elite to its core. The real storm hadn't even begun. Dr. Angela Thompson walked into her son's hospital room with the calm, powerful presence that had earned her respect throughout Boston Memorial Hospital. She wore her white coat with the gold embroidery that marked her position as chief of surgery, but right now, she wasn't thinking like a doctor. She was thinking like a mother. "Marcus," she said softly, looking at the redness on her son's face. "How are you feeling?" "I'm okay, Mom," Marcus replied, trying to smile. "It's not as bad as it looks. The nurse said there won't be any permanent damage." Angela sat down next to the hospital bed, her face serious. "I saw the video. Everyone at the hospital has seen it." She paused, then added, "including William Wellington." Marcus's eyes widened. "Wellington? You mean?" "Yes," Angela nodded. The woman who threw coffee at you this morning is Patricia Wellington, wife of Dr. William Wellington, the same William Wellington who wants to become the next chairman of our hospital board." The room fell silent as Marcus processed this information. He knew his mother was important at Boston Memorial, but he had never paid much attention to hospital politics. He worked at Morning Brew Cafe, went to his medical school classes, and tried to make his mother proud. Now, these two worlds had suddenly crashed together. Meanwhile, in William Wellington's office at Boston Memorial Hospital, chaos was unfolding. His secretary had just brought him more bad news. "Dr. Wellington," she said nervously, "the board members are asking about this morning's incident. And Dr. Thompson has called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning." William felt his stomach drop. He had known Angela Thompson professionally for years. She was not only the chief of surgery, but also controlled the hospital's largest fundraising committee. Her support was crucial for his chairman bid, and now his wife had assaulted her son. He picked up his phone to call Patricia, but stopped when he saw the latest news alert. The story had gone national. Major news websites were running headlines about a wealthy Boston woman's racist coffee attack. His hands shook as he put the phone down. Back in the hospital room, Angela was showing Marcus something on her tablet. It was the hospital's donor list from the last fundraising gala. The Wellington family name appeared at the top, with a donation of $2 million. "Mom," Marcus said slowly, "what are you thinking?" Angela smiled, but it wasn't her usual warm smile. It was the smile her surgical residents saw when she was about to teach them a crucial lesson. "I'm thinking it's time for some changes at Boston Memorial. Changes in how we handle discrimination, how we choose our leaders, and how we protect our community." She stood up and straightened her white coat. "The Wellingtons think their money gives them power. But they forget that I've spent 20 years building relationships in this hospital. Every nurse, doctor, and board member knows my work. They know my integrity." Just then, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah Chen, Robert's wife, and the head nurse of the emergency department. The message read, "Angela, the video has reached all hospital staff. We stand with Marcus." Angela showed the message to Marcus. "You see? This isn't just about you or me anymore. This is about every person who has ever been treated as less than human because of their race or position." Marcus watched his mother, amazed. He had always known she was strong, but this was different. This was his mother in her element, preparing to fight a battle she knew she could win. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," Angela said, checking her watch, "I have a board meeting to prepare for. By this time tomorrow, the Wellingtons will learn that their money can't protect them from everything." She paused at the door. "And Marcus, take tomorrow off from the cafe. I think things are going to get interesting." As Angela walked down the hospital corridor, staff members nodded respectfully, some offering words of support. Everyone knew Dr. Thompson's reputation for fairness and excellence. But today, they were seeing a new side of her, a mother protecting her son, and a leader about to challenge the hospital's old power structure. Patricia Wellington's coffee attack hadn't just hurt Marcus physically. It had awakened a force she never saw coming. A mother's determination to create change, backed by the power to make it happen. Patricia Wellington sat in her living room, staring at her silent phone. It had been 2 days since the coffee shop incident, and her world was crumbling around her. The designer curtains were drawn shut to keep out the news vans parked outside her luxury apartment building. Her house phone rang, breaking the silence. Patricia jumped to answer it, hoping it was one of her friends finally returning her calls. "Hello, Mrs. Wellington," said a formal voice. "This is Barbara Wakeman from the Boston Ladies Charity Foundation. I'm calling about your position as event chairperson for next month's annual gala." Patricia's grip tightened on the phone. She had chaired the gala for the past 5 years. "Yes, Barbara? Is there something we need to discuss?" "Well," Barbara's voice was cold. "In light of recent events, the board feels it would be best if you step down. We can't have our charity associated with such behavior." Before Patricia could argue, Barbara continued, "We'll announce your resignation citing personal reasons. It's the cleanest way to handle this." After hanging up, Patricia walked to her drinks cabinet with shaking hands. As she poured herself a glass of expensive wine, her phone buzzed with a news alert. She nearly dropped the glass when she read the headline, "More victims come forward. Coffee shop incident reveals pattern of racist behavior. The article featured interviews with 3 former workers from different high-end stores. They'd all described similar encounters with Patricia, discriminatory comments, demands for special treatment, and public humiliation of staff members of color. Meanwhile, across town at Boston Memorial Hospital, William Wellington was facing his own crisis. He sat in his office, watching his computer screen as another board member sent their regrets about next week's fundraising dinner at his home. That made 15 cancellations so far. His secretary knocked on the door. "Dr. Wellington, the newspaper is online too. They're asking for a comment about your wife's history of discriminatory behavior and how it might affect your board chairman candidacy." William put his head in his hands. "Tell them no comment." He knew anything he said would only make things worse. Back at Morning Brew Cafe, the atmosphere had completely changed. Customers were leaving extra-large tips and writing supportive messages for Marcus. Local civil rights groups had organized a support rally outside, and the line for coffee stretched around the block. Jenny, Marcus's coworker, was being interviewed by a local news station. "Marcus has always been the kindest person here," she said into the camera. "He's working to put himself through medical school, and he treats every customer with respect, even the ones who don't deserve it." The corporate office had finally released a statement banning Patricia Wellington from all their locations nationwide. They'd also announced a new anti-discrimination training program for all staff and customers. At the Wellington's Country Club, the membership committee was holding an emergency meeting. Patricia had been a member for 20 years, but the viral video and new allegations were causing serious concern. "We can't ignore this," said George Harrison, the committee chairman. "3 other members have threatened to leave if we don't address the situation." The committee voted unanimously to suspend Patricia's membership pending a full review. That evening, Patricia tried logging into her social media accounts, only to find hundreds of angry messages and comments. Her carefully curated image of Boston social royalty was shattering. Even her closest friend, Margaret, had publicly posted, "I cannot and will not condone such behavior. My friendship with Patricia Wellington is over." William arrived home late that night, looking exhausted. "Pat," he said quietly, "Dr. Thompson is Marcus's mother." Patricia's face went pale. "What? The chief of surgery?" "Yes," William replied, loosening his tie. "The same Dr. Thompson who chairs the hospital's fundraising committee, the one whose support I needed for the chairman position." Patricia sank into her expensive leather sofa. "Can't you talk to her? Explain that I was just having a bad day." William laughed bitterly. "A bad day? Pat, you threw hot coffee in her son's face while using racist language. It's all on video. There's no explaining that away." As night fell over Boston, Patricia Wellington realized that her actions hadn't just created a scandal. They had started a chain reaction that was destroying everything she had taken for granted. And somewhere in the city, Dr. Angela Thompson was just getting started. Dr. Angela Thompson sat at her large desk in Boston Memorial Hospital, reviewing documents with careful attention. The morning sun streamed through her office windows, highlighting the many awards and certificates on her walls. But today, she wasn't looking at medical records. Instead, she was studying the hospital's major donor list and fundraising plans for the next 5 years. Her assistant knocked on the door. "Dr. Thompson, the board members are starting to arrive for the emergency meeting." Angela nodded, gathering her papers. "Thank you, Janet. And has Dr. Wellington arrived yet?" "Yes, he's already in the conference room. He looks nervous." In the large conference room, William Wellington sat alone, checking his phone every few seconds. The other board members slowly filed in, but none sat near him. Some even avoided making eye contact. These were the same people who used to laugh at his jokes and invite him to golf outings. At exactly 9:00 a.m., Dr. Thompson walked in. The room fell silent. She carried a thick folder and wore the confident expression that had earned her the nickname, the Quiet Storm, among hospital staff. "Good morning," she began, her voice calm but firm. "I've called this emergency meeting to discuss several important matters regarding our hospital's future." William shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He knew what was coming. Angela opened her folder. "First, I want to present our new anti-discrimination policy." She started passing out documents to each board member. "This policy will apply to all hospital staff, board members, and their families. One board member raised his hand. Their families? That's a bit unusual, isn't it? Recent events have shown us that the behavior of family members can directly impact our hospital's reputation, Angela replied, glancing briefly at William. As board members, we represent this hospital in every aspect of our lives. She clicked a button, and a video started playing on the large screen. It showed news coverage of the coffee shop incident, followed by social media reactions and comments from civil rights organizations. This incident, Angela continued, has brought unwanted attention to our hospital. Dr. Wellington's wife's actions have raised questions about our commitment to equality and justice. William tried to speak. Dr. Thompson, I want to apologize. Angela held up her hand. This isn't about apologies, Dr. Wellington. This is about change. Real, lasting change. She pulled out another document. Here are the numbers from our community outreach programs. Under my leadership, we've increased medical care access in underserved neighborhoods by 200%. Our minority hiring rate has doubled. We can do better. The board members nodded, some taking notes. They all knew Dr. Thompson's reputation for getting things done. Now, she continued, about the chairman position. She looked directly at William. Dr. Wellington, your candidacy was strong. But this incident has shown us that leadership isn't just about medical skill or donations. It's about character, family values, and community trust. William's face turned pale. He knew his dream of becoming chairman was over. Angela then revealed her masterstroke. I'm proposing a new structure for our fundraising committee. All major donations will now go through a diversity and ethics review. We can't let money bind us to our values. The meeting continued for 2 hours. By the end, the board had unanimously approved the new anti-discrimination policy, the restructured fundraising system, and a community advisory board to oversee hospital policies. As the board members filed out, Janet approached Angela with more news. Dr. Thompson, 3 major donors have called. They want to increase their support after seeing your leadership today. Back in her office, Angela finally allowed herself a small smile. She picked up a photo from her desk, a picture of young Marcus in his first white coat ceremony. Her phone buzzed with a text from him. How did it go, Mom? She typed back. The board meeting went well. Change is coming, honey. Real change. Meanwhile, William Wellington walked slowly to his office, his shoulders heavy. His phone rang. It was Patricia. He let it go to voicemail. How could he tell her that their social and professional world had just been completely transformed by the quiet power of a mother protecting not just her son, but everything she believed in? At Boston Memorial Hospital, a new era was beginning, and Dr. Angela Thompson was leading the way, proving that sometimes the strongest response to discrimination isn't loud protest, but calculated, professional change from within the system. Patricia Wellington sat in her publicist's expensive downtown office, surrounded by newspaper headlines about her coffee shop incident. Linda Martinez, the top crisis manager in Boston, read through the latest social media reports on her tablet, frowning deeply. We need to act fast, Linda said, putting down her tablet. The story isn't going away. In fact, it's getting worse. Now people are sharing old stories about your behavior at other stores and restaurants. Patricia adjusted her pearl necklace nervously. So what do we do? Can't we just say it was all a big misunderstanding? Linda shook her head. The video is too clear. Your best option now is to show real remorse and try to make things right. She handed Patricia a carefully written statement. We'll hold a press conference this afternoon. You'll read this apology and announce a large donation to a racial justice organization. 2 hours later, Patricia stood before a crowd of reporters in the Ritz-Carlton's conference room. Camera lights flashed as she read from the prepared statement, her voice shaking slightly. I deeply regret my actions at Morning Brew Cafe, she read. My behavior was unacceptable. I have learned from this incident and am committed to doing better. To show my commitment to change, I am donating $500,000 to the Boston Coalition for Racial Justice. The reporters shouted questions. Mrs. Wellington, what about the other incidents? Did you know Marcus Thompson's mother is Dr. Angela Thompson? Is it true your country club membership has been suspended? Linda quickly ended the press conference, hurrying Patricia out through a side door to avoid more questions. Later that evening, Patricia attended her regular dinner at the exclusive Beacon Hill Club. one of the few places that hadn't banned her yet. She sat with her last remaining friend, Victoria, unaware that a server was recording her conversation on their phone. "Can you believe I had to stand there and apologize?" Patricia complained, sipping her expensive wine. "And that donation? William is furious about the money, but Linda said we had no choice." Victoria looked uncomfortable. "Pat, maybe you should be taking this more seriously." "Seriously?" Patricia scoffed. "It was just coffee. And now I'm being forced to give money to these organizations. The whole thing is ridiculous." Within an hour, the recording was online. Social media exploded with new outrage as Patricia's true feelings became public. Linda's phone started ringing nonstop. At Boston Memorial Hospital, Dr. Angela Thompson watched the video of Patricia's press conference on her office computer. Her assistant, Janet, stood nearby, reading the latest online reactions. "Her apology seems rehearsed," Janet observed. "And now this recording from the club." Angela nodded. "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." She checked her watch. "Has the hospital board seen this?" "Yes," Janet replied. "They're discussing moving up the chairman vote. Dr. Wellington's chances are basically zero now." Across town, William Wellington watched the same press conference video in his home office, a glass of scotch in his hand. His phone buzzed with a text from the hospital board secretary. "Emergency meeting tomorrow morning. Chairmanship vote on agenda." He heard Patricia's voice from downstairs, complaining loudly on the phone about the unfair treatment she was receiving. William closed his eyes, realizing that his wife still didn't understand the magnitude of what she had done. Meanwhile, at Morning Brew Cafe, Marcus was back at work. Customers kept showing him the video of Patricia's apology on their phones, asking for his opinion. He just smiled and continued making their drinks, remembering his mother's advice: "Let your actions speak louder than words." The cafe had become a symbol of resistance against discrimination. People were leaving notes of support, and many customers shared stories of their own experiences with racism. The tip jar, now labeled Marcus's medical school fund, was overflowing. As the day ended, Linda Martinez sat in her office, drafting yet another press statement. Her phone lit up with a news alert. "Wellington Club dinner recording goes viral. Sincerity of apology questioned." She sighed heavily and dialed Patricia's number. The damage control had become damage multiplication. What Patricia didn't understand was that in today's world, money and social status couldn't hide true character, especially when it was caught on camera, not once, but twice. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Boston Memorial Hospital's main conference room as board members took their seats for the most anticipated meeting of the year. Dr. Angela Thompson stood at the front, her presence commanding attention without saying a word. William Wellington entered last, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usual confident stride was replaced by tired, heavy steps. The folder in his hands contained his resignation from the chairman race, but Dr. Thompson was about to present something much bigger. "Good morning," Angela began, her voice clear and strong. "Today, we're not just voting for a new chairman. We're voting for the future of this hospital." She pressed a button, and the screen behind her lit up with a presentation titled "The Community First Initiative." The board members leaned forward, intrigued. Even William looked up from his resignation letter. "For too long," Angela continued, "we've measured success by the size of donations and the prestige of our donors. Today, that changes." She started showing slides of community statistics, patient demographics, and hospital hiring data. "Our new policy has three main parts," she explained. "First, all major donors must sign our anti-discrimination pledge. Second, we're creating a community oversight board with real power. And third, we're launching a scholarship program for minority medical students." William Wellington watched as his colleagues nodded in approval. He thought about Marcus, working his way through medical school while facing people like his wife every day. Meanwhile, across town, Patricia Wellington sat in her empty apartment, watching her phone light up with another news alert. Her country club membership had been officially revoked. The message cited behavior unbefitting our standards as the reason. Back at the hospital, Angela was finishing her presentation. "This isn't just about one incident in a coffee shop," she said, looking directly at William. "It's about creating lasting change. Dr. Wellington, would you like to say something?" William stood slowly, his hands shaking slightly. Yes, I would. He took a deep breath. I'm not just withdrawing from the chairman race. I'm also pledging $1 million to the new scholarship program. He paused, then added, and I'm filing for divorce. A murmur ran through the room. Nobody had expected this. My wife's actions opened my eyes, William continued. I spent years ignoring problems, making excuses, prioritizing social status over what's right. That ends today. At Morning Brew Cafe, Marcus was having his own moment of triumph. The corporate office had promoted him to manager, with flexible hours to accommodate his medical school schedule. More importantly, they had adopted his suggestions for staff training and customer behavior guidelines. Jenny, his coworker, rushed up to him with her phone. Marcus, have you seen this? She showed him the breaking news. Boston Memorial Hospital announces revolutionary anti-discrimination policy. William Wellington pledges $1 million donation and announces divorce. Marcus smiled, thinking of his mother. She had turned one ugly incident into an opportunity for real change. That afternoon, Dr. Thompson called a staff meeting to announce the new policies. The hospital cafeteria was packed with doctors, nurses, and support staff. When she mentioned the scholarship program, the room erupted in applause. This is just the beginning, she told them. Real change takes time, but it also takes courage to make the first step. After the meeting, she found a moment alone in her office. She looked at the photo of Marcus in his white coat and thought about how far they'd both come. Her phone buzzed with a message from him. Proud of you, Mom. You're changing things for real. As evening fell over Boston, the story was making national headlines. Other hospitals were already calling to learn more about the Community First initiative. William Wellington was being praised for his honest self-reflection and concrete actions to make amends. And Patricia? She sat alone in her apartment, finally beginning to understand. Her social circle had crumbled, her marriage was ending, and her reputation was in ruins. But more importantly, her actions had sparked a change that would help countless others. Dr. Angela Thompson's quiet power had transformed a moment of discrimination into a movement for change. She hadn't just protected her son, she had created a legacy that would benefit generations to come. In the end, it wasn't just about a cup of coffee thrown in anger. It was about the ripples that spread when one person stands up and says, "This stops here." 6 months had passed since the coffee shop incident. The fresh autumn air swept through Boston's streets as Marcus Thompson walked up the steps of Boston Memorial Hospital, wearing his new white coat. The name tag read Marcus Thompson, medical resident, shining proudly in the morning sun. He had graduated from medical school with honors, and despite offers from prestigious hospitals across the country, he chose to do his residency at Boston City Hospital. Not his mother's hospital, he wanted to make his own path. I want to serve the community that supported me, he had told his mother when explaining his choice. Dr. Angela Thompson had smiled proudly, understanding completely. Meanwhile, Patricia Wellington's life had changed dramatically. She now lived alone in a modest apartment, far from her former luxury penthouse. The divorce had been finalized, and William had kept his promise about the $1 million donation to the scholarship program. On this particular morning, Patricia walked into the community center in downtown Boston. Her designer clothes and pearls were gone, replaced by simple, practical clothing. She wasn't here to chair a charity event or make a splash in social pages. She was here to work. "Good morning, Mrs. Wellington," said Mr. Rodriguez, the center's director. "The after-school program starts in an hour. The kids are excited about story time." Patricia nodded, arranging children's books on small chairs in a circle. After losing everything, she had hit rock bottom. Then, unexpectedly, Mr. Rodriguez had offered her a chance to volunteer, not for show, not for social status, but for real purpose. At first, people were skeptical about her presence at the community center. But over months of consistent work, genuine effort, and actual learning, opinions slowly began to change. "You're different now," one of the young mothers had told her recently. "You actually see us as people." Back at Boston Memorial Hospital, Dr. Angela Thompson's Community First initiative had become a national model. 5 other major hospitals had adopted similar programs. The scholarship fund, now named the Thompson Wellington Medical Scholarship, had already helped 15 minority students start their medical careers. William Wellington had found his own path to redemption. Though no longer chairman, he dedicated himself to mentoring young doctors from diverse backgrounds. His public acknowledgement of his past failings and concrete actions to make amends had earned him new respect. At Morning Brew Cafe, a framed news article hung on the wall. Local incident sparks national change in hospital policies. Jenny, now the store manager, often told new employees the story as part of their training. It's not just about making coffee, she would say. It's about treating everyone with dignity. Marcus's medical school fund tip jar had inspired a company-wide program to help employees pursue higher education. The corporate office had made it official policy, calling it the Thompson Scholarship Program. Late that afternoon, Patricia sat with a group of children, reading them a story. One little girl, Maya, looked up at her with curious eyes. "Miss Patricia," she asked, "why did you decide to help at our center?" Patricia paused, considering the question carefully. "Because I needed to learn some very important lessons," she answered honestly. "And you all became my best teachers." Across town, Marcus finished his first day as a resident. As he walked through the hospital parking lot, he noticed a familiar face, William Wellington. "Dr. Thompson," William called out, using Marcus's new professional title. "I heard you chose Boston City Hospital. They're lucky to have you." "Thank you, Dr. Wellington," Marcus replied politely. "I heard about your mentoring program. Sounds like good work." William nodded, then said quietly, "Your mother's actions, they didn't just change the hospital. They changed me. Sometimes it takes losing everything to see what really matters." As the day ended, Dr. Angela Thompson sat in her office, looking at a new photo on her desk. It showed Marcus in his resident's white coat, standing proud and tall. Next to it was a newspaper clipping about the community center's after-school program, with a small picture of Patricia reading to children. She picked up her phone to answer a call from another hospital CEO, wanting to learn about her initiative. Before speaking, she glanced at a quote she had framed on her wall. "Change comes not from revenge, but from transformation." The coffee shop incident had ended, but its ripples continued to spread, touching lives in unexpected ways. It had shown that true change was possible, even from the most unlikely beginnings, when people were brave enough to learn, grow, and transform.